It is great to have you here with us this morning. If we haven't met, my name is Dean. It is great to be together. If we're here in the room or up in Merwa or in your home, wherever we are, it's great to have you. And it's great to be back together. You know, our church, we gather every Sunday. And this week, we're also welcoming a new member of the family back from holidays. Riley Turner is back, and we are welcoming his daughter, Olive. Give a big clap. We got a picture of Olive wherever you are. Celebrating Olive. Welcome to the tribe, Olive. That is absolutely beautiful. That bed is giant. Is it giant or is she's tiny? She's tiny. It's so beautiful. Love this photo and so excited to celebrate with you guys and see the family keep on growing. It's so great. And that's it. You know, if you're brand new around here, one of the great things about being part of a church is not just kind of this thing you go to on a Sunday. It's a community. It's a tribe you're part of, and that's one of the things we love to just celebrate. Good news stories like that. You know, we are in a new series. We are coming up to Easter, if you can believe it. We're only a couple of weeks away, and as we make our way towards Easter, we are starting a new series today called Behold the Man. You know, the unique thing about Easter, and it's the moment we remember Jesus' death on the cross, his resurrection 3 days later. As a church, it's what actually brings us together every week of the year because we believe this is the most transformative event, bar none, that has changed all of human history, and it can change your history. But this is a time where we want to stop and to focus afresh and anew on who Jesus is. And so this next few weeks across Easter, this series is called Behold the Man, because to behold something, in fact, wherever you are, let me hear you say, behold. 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 To behold something is to stop, to look, to consider. It's almost to take it and hold it in kind of the eyes of your heart and to really reflect on, to really look at, to study, to consider, to just behold. We behold things that are almost kind of stunning to see. And the whole idea of behold the man is going to be about how over this next few weeks we behold Jesus. We look at him. We see him. We consider who he is and the impact he can have on each one of our lives. This phrase, behold the man, actually comes to us from an unlikely source. It's a phrase that we find in John chapter 19, and it is first kind of offered by Pontius Pilate in the lead up to the cross. It says this in John 19:5. It says, when Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, famously put on him to mock him, Pilate said to this crowd, behold the man, behold the man. In Latin, it's ecce homo, and it's this phrase that throughout the church that kind of calls us, it's almost ironic because this phrase, to behold him, is given by this man, Pontius Pilate, who we're going to get to know him a little bit this morning, but this governor in Rome who actually had been interrogating Jesus. He's had him beaten, mocked. He's a man who finds himself kind of caught between what a crowd wants him to do, what he's thinking about, and wanting to just kind of get himself off the hook. And all of a sudden, and in this moment, when he brings Jesus out, he says, behold the man. But he gives what is one of the primary invitations to every human being who has ever lived since: the opportunity to stop and consider who is Jesus. We're going to begin today looking at this story that we are going to pick up in John chapter 18. And we're going to pick up the story of Jesus and his interactions with Pontius Pilate. And the way it works is basically Jesus, he has been publicly teaching for about 3 years, been doing miracles. All these things have been going on. The ruling religious leaders of the day, I guess you could say, if you were going to sum it up, he's becoming a bit of a threat in some ways, the things he's teaching, and they're not quite sure what to do with it, because not only is he teaching things, he's actually made a claim to be the Son of God, and so they can see he's claiming to be God, and that is for them blasphemy, but they don't have the right for them. They believe because he claimed to be the Son of God that he should be put to death, but they don't have the right to put him to death. So they hand him over to the Roman authorities, who do have the right to, if they can find him guilty in a criminal sense, they have the right to crucify him. And so they are going to suggest that he is a threat to the empire. He's a threat to the king. He's claiming to be a king. And so for that reason, they hand him over to Pilate. And we're going to pick it up in this conversation. John 18:28. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So this is this very important feast that's taking place. So Pilate came out to them, and he asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" Now pause for a moment right here. What we're going to find is like a courtroom proceeding. This is a criminal trial. Jesus is being put on trial, and my invitation to each one of us is to realize this. The incredible thing about this whole story is that God entrusts himself and allows himself to be almost placed on trial by human beings. He offers each one of us the opportunity and the choice to decide what we will believe about who he is. And so he is Pilate. He says, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" And they say, "If he were not a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Well, then take him yourselves. Judge him by your own law. But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Crucifixion, being raised on a tree. Only the Romans could hand that out. Verse 33. So Pilate then went back inside the palace, and he summoned Jesus, and he asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus says to him, "Is that your own idea, or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Now, what I want us to reflect a little bit in this first part of the conversation, or interrogation, between Pilate and Jesus, is that Pilate here, in so many ways, represents, it would be easy for all of us to say, well, Pilate, he was this kind of bad guy, a little bit kind of swayed by crowds back then, Roman governor, he's not a good guy, and in this story, he is very much, you could almost, I guess, say the villain, but or one of them, but he is invited into that question that I talked to you about, this question of who do you believe Jesus to be? But Pilate, the one thing he wants is, I don't want to decide, is basically, he just does not want to have to kind of put his chips down anywhere. He doesn't want to have to make a decision. He doesn't want to have to say, here's what I believe in. So he's going to try and distance himself. And so the crowds have brought Jesus, but Pilate's going to constantly try and go back and forth. You'll see him go out to the crowd and then back to Jesus. And he's forced into having to make a decision. Do you know all of us would rather not have to make decisions about certain things, but there are some things that we must make decisions about. And Jesus, by his very nature, by the things he said, the things he taught, and the things he did, for all of human history, every one of us must decide at some level, who do we believe him to be? And what will be the effect of that belief on our lives? You know, for many people, they would want to be a bit like Pilate here, who Pilate asked this question. He's trying to say, he's saying to the leaders, look, this is your problem. This is your deal. And Jesus, even says to him, you've heard this question, which will be the central question. Is Jesus the king of the Jews? Is Jesus a king? And what's the nature of his kingdom? That's what this particular episode will be about in these verses. But in and amongst that, the same decision that Pilate has to make is the same decision everyone has to make. What do we do with who Jesus is? What do we do with the things he taught and did? Some people would want to be like Pilate and say, no, this is not my problem. This is not my issue. It's not my question. But the reality is we must all come to grips with it. Some people would say, and maybe Jesus was good. He was a good teacher. He had some good things to say. A lot of people say, oh, I'm sure he had some good things to say, but things probably just got confused, over history. And I don't know, he's probably just a generally good person. I love what C.S. Lewis famously wrote about this, about the decision people must make about Jesus. He said these words in his famous book, Mere Christianity. He said, a man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would be either a lunatic, because he claimed to be God, or on a level with the man who says he's a poached egg, Amazing he was using poached eggs back there. I thought they only got popular in like the last 10 years. But anyway. Or else he would be the devil of hell. But you must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, as Jesus claimed to be, or else he was a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool. You can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. Jesus, by the very nature of the things he claimed about himself, this is often summarized. People say, you have to choose whether you believe Jesus was a liar, was he not telling the truth? Do you believe he was a lunatic, that he really believed this stuff but he was crazy? Or is he Lord? Is he king? And Pilate just wants to somehow say, I'm not having it. You deal with it yourselves. And what's amazing is Jesus says to Pilate, okay, this idea that I am king of the Jews, is that your idea, Pilate, or do people tell you about that? Is that a question you genuinely have and want to explore, or is this just because the leaders have said this? This is what Jesus is doing in this moment of interrogating. And it's fascinating because Pilate is the one who's like, he's got all the power theoretically, he's in charge, he's interrogating Jesus, but Jesus starts to interrogate him. Do you know what's amazing is that Jesus, I mean, maybe it's not only amazing, but maybe almost a little like, oh boy, this is where sometimes it gets tricky. A lot of us would like Jesus to sometimes just fit in a box, but Jesus has a way of starting to interrogate us. When I say interrogate, I don't mean to make us feel bad, but actually to ask us questions that probe what's really going on in our heart. Only Jesus does it not because he wants to throw us in jail or lock us up, but because he wants to lead us towards life. And even with Pilate, you can actually see Jesus trying to say, is this your idea? Or did somebody bring it? Jesus is going to try and engage his mind and his heart. But Pilate says, he literally says, am I a Jew? Which often others have translated that almost basically what he's saying is, hey, this is not my business. Do I care? If you're king, whatever, but you're not my king, is what Pilate is basically saying. At the very core of this entire interrogation of Jesus is the issue of, is he a king, and what is the nature of his kingdom? It goes on, the story tells us this. As he goes back, we pick up in the next verse. Pilate's asking him about his kingdom, what have you done? And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Wherever you are, let me hear you say kingdom. This is going to be all about the nature of the kingdom. You got Pilate representing the kingdom of Rome, the emperor and the empire of Rome. Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born, came into the world, is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Now here is where it's going to kind of get to the pointy end of the stick. Jesus is going to start to say, he's going to be really clear, I am a king. But my kingdom is not of this world. In other words, he's going to say, my kingdom is different than the kingdoms of this world. It works in this world, it's operating in this world, but my kingdom is not like the other kingdoms of this world. See, I want you to imagine for a moment, and this is so core to understanding who Jesus is and what it means to have him as king. Well, let's take for a moment the kingdom that Pilate was representing, the kingdom of Rome, the empire. At that time, the greatest empire, kind of biggest in the known world. And at the head of that empire was a king, and that was Caesar. And a kingdom is sort of where, imagine at that time the empire, the kingdom of Rome, it would have had borders. There were kind of areas in which the kingdom was operative, and the borders and the edges and the operative kind of place of the kingdom is wherever the king's word goes. You know, if you imagine you have the emperor and he says, these are the laws, these are the rules, this is how it works in this empire. If you don't pay your taxes, you can be, put to death. Aren't we glad that's not a rule necessarily today? But, his word, that empire's word, that's the kingdom. Now, Caesar could have a view about how things should work, but maybe there's some other place, it's Gaul or some other, kind of land outside Rome. That's not part of the kingdom. The king's not there. They do whatever they want to do in their kingdom. Okay, so a kingdom is wherever you have a king whose will is carried out. Does that make sense? So Jesus says, the thing you have to understand about my kingdom is not like these kingdoms. Their kingdom was guarded by armies and borders, and it was within a certain sphere. And Jesus is like, my kingdom, it transcends all those things. It's not the same kind of nationalized, kind of territorial. It's actually, my kingdom is wherever my Father's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. It's the kingdom of heaven. And that kingdom doesn't need armies. It doesn't need borders. It is not like the kingdoms of this world. In fact, it is at work within every small K kingdom. Because that kingdom becomes operative whenever a person acknowledges Jesus as my king and chooses to now live his way. I love what contrasting the kingdoms of this world versus the nature of the kingdom that Jesus came to found. Napoleon has this famous quote. Now, he was a king, an emperor who did kind of the usual kingdom stuff of trying to expand empire and kingdom. And he once commented this, and we don't really know his exact views on Jesus, but one of the famous quotes he had about Jesus, he said this. He said, I know men, and I tell you that Jesus Christ is no mere man. Between him and every other person in the world, there's no possible term of comparison. Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and I have founded empires. But on what did we rest the creation of our genius? Upon force. Jesus Christ founded his empire on love. And at this hour, millions of men would die for him. And I love that quote always because it sets up a little bit of that extraordinary contrast between the kind of kingdom that Jesus founded and the kingdoms we're used to. Whatever else Napoleon believed or whether he ever acknowledged Jesus king, who knows? But what he could see is this is just not like the kingdoms of this world. Jesus laid down his life and invites us into his kingdom. I want you to see one of the core. If his kingdom is not like just the kingdoms of this world, look at what his kingdom is about. Jesus said, as we go back to those verses, verse 36, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest. And remember, Jesus stopped them when they tried to do that. But now my kingdom is from another place. So Pilate's like, so you are a king. And Jesus is like, yep, you say I'm a king. You're right. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Let me hear you say truth. Truth. The nature of Jesus' kingdom is that we step into it when we align ourselves to truth. The truth of who God is, of how this world, why it was created, the truth about us, the truth that Jesus came to testify to. And Jesus said, everyone on the side of truth, that which is real, that which is not pretended, that which is not, what was happening here, politicking and power grabs and all these things. Everyone on the side of truth, Jesus says, listens to me. Let me hear you say, listens to me. Jesus says, oh, listen to me. Elsewhere in the book of John, he talks about how his sheep hear his voice. Do you know that the primary thing that brings us into the kingdom of God, into Jesus' kingdom, is learning to listen to him, to hear his voice, to listen to his word. But to listen to Jesus, to be part of his kingdom, is not just to kind of go, that's great, and I think it's a good idea. It is to align ourselves with his truth and start to not just hear the truth, but to walk in the truth. And that allows us to start to walk in his kingdom. Jesus says, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. It's as we hear that truth and walk in his truth that we actually find the life we were created for. Do you know, I sometimes on a Sunday morning, I want us to reflect a little bit about, now if you're here and you're a person of faith, you're a follower of Jesus, we are still always confronted with this question, will we acknowledge Jesus as king? Do you know what is our challenge sometimes is we'd almost rather Jesus was a bit more of maybe a life coach. Wouldn't it be great if Jesus was just like a life coach? You just kind of go to him and say, Jesus, how can you, I've got some goals. I got some things I want to be pursuing. I'm going after. Jesus, you see some things in my life that could be better, that we could go after. And we kind of, it can be easy in our culture or context to kind of put Jesus in this category where he'll be there to kind of help us just reach our goals and reach for the stars, and Jesus will help us get there. Can I tell you, his offer to us is not, I'll come be your life coach or even your cheerleader. He says, I want to come to be two things. I want to be your Savior, and I want to be your King. And when we acknowledge him as King, that's a totally different reality. Because when you acknowledge him as King, you're saying, I'm stepping into the kingdom where the will of the King is done. Where it's not what I want to do. I'm saying, Jesus, I want to live by your ways. And so everyone on the side of truth, everyone who wants to step into that, they listen to Jesus and start to walk his way and find life when we align ourselves to his word, to his truth. You know, I was reading a book about trains recently. I do this a bit more often than I used to. This particular book about trains was about a blue train and a green train. And the blue train's name was Thomas, and the green train's name was Percy. And they would do their big delivery run. You know, the up would come the yellow sun, and, you know, blue train Thomas starts his run. And anyway, but if you're a train lover or you enjoy, you know, railroading, that's, you know, it's just kind of fun stuff. But, you know, we read these books about trains, but, you know, what I love always about, when you think about a train, and you imagine, most of us familiar with maybe Thomas the train, and, you know, imagine Thomas wanted to just get himself off the tracks. You might think, okay, that's going to be the place where Thomas will be free and not bound anymore by these tracks. If he could just be off those tracks, he could do whatever he wanted. But we all know if Thomas falls off the tracks, he's actually just going to be stuck. He's not built to kind of drive around in the mud and the dirt. He's not built for four-wheel driving. He's built for train tracks. And those train tracks, when Thomas is actually aligned to them, is when he will actually fulfill his purpose. You see, Jesus' truth, when he says, everyone on the side of truth, listen to me. If you listen to Jesus, said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. When we align ourselves to Jesus, and not just saying, Jesus, I want to hear some nice, you know, words from you to help me figure out. No, when we actually say, no, Jesus, you're my King. I'm aligning myself to your will, to your ways. What happens is like our lives get on the tracks that we were built for, and now we are actually able to become the people that he dreams us to be. When we actually allow him to be King. We say, Lord, Jesus, I want to do that which I want your kingdom to come, your will be done in my life as it is in heaven. We have so many other sets of tracks, or we live in a world that more often just says, you just go kind of be you and do you and pursue this kingdom, pursue this vision for life. Do you know, we sometimes don't realize, like, you know, we don't have the Roman Empire, but do you know we are constantly forced to choose between the different visions of kingdoms and who will be our king? How many people know one of the, you know, greatest competitors to King Jesus in our lives? We live in a world right here in Perth, in our context, it's just the kingdom of comfort is one of the greatest challenges I believe we have in our culture. I often on a Sunday, I did even today, driving along the coastline, and often on a Sunday morning, I drive along the coastline, and I look for people from True North Church who aren't here, and I write their names, and I put it, and we have a big file for everyone. So if that's such a, I'm just kidding, just joking. Riley, start that file though. Anyway, but I often drive, and I often pray for people, but I often just drive the coast because, as we know, it's extraordinary, it's beautiful, it's God's creation. I love to look at it. But I often find myself on a Sunday morning, if you've never driven along, you know, kind of West Coast Highway on a Sunday morning, you know, it is packed. Anybody ever drive along it? Anybody ever walking along it? Anybody eating, like having a flat white? And again, for the file. But no, just kidding. But sometimes I look, and it's not to say that, okay, no way, like you're a bad person because you at the beach instead of, but what we have to acknowledge in our lives as human beings is all of us will choose a kingdom. Our lives will revolve around something. And we live in a world that will constantly push us to say, let life revolve around comfort. Just find what makes you feel happy. And let your life revolve around that. Just go have an almond flat white and some smashed avo, and just let that be your routine. And believe me, I drink my fair share of actually almond long macchiatos, and I'm not a stranger to avocado. I'm not trying to pretend but my point is this: we all have to fundamentally find what will be the one thing my life revolves around. That's the kingdom we'll end up pursuing. We'll make all our decisions based on, is this aligning me with the King? Is it aligning me with the King and Jesus? Is it aligning me with the King comfort? What are we aligning ourselves to? Before we moved to Perth, we used to live just outside New York City. My wife Lisa used to teach in New York City and in the Bronx, and it is a challenging area of New York City. And I just share this for a moment to say, the hardest thing sometimes is to spot the rival kingdoms in the culture you live in. Because we're just so used to it, we think it's the way life is. Can I tell you something? We did outreach to kind of kids in the Bronx. We were not worried about them falling, kind of like acknowledging the kingdom of comfort as being their primary threat to following Jesus. That wasn't it. It was other things. It was often survival. It was how you're going to kind of make your way. What temptations will you give into in the hopes of survival? Like, all that just to say, we have to acknowledge sometimes and look around and realize one of the greatest challenges to acknowledging Jesus as King is we are constantly being tempted in our culture to make comfort king. Everything can end up. And the real challenge and crux of that always comes down to the same question that Jesus is asking Pilate. Pilate's going, are you really the king? And then Pilate's going, well, you're not my king. What's the nature of your kingdom? We all must choose, and sometimes on a daily basis, who will Jesus be in our life? Will he be king, and will we give our lives to try to go his way, walk in his truth, align ourselves with his truth? We live in a world that will always say, find your truth. Jesus says, I want you to come live in my truth. Acknowledge me as king. And that's where actual freedom and life will be found. That's where we will get aligned on the tracks to actually experience the life. Because as good as the kingdom of comfort can be, if your life is built on it, boy, it'll let you down eventually. It just can't sustain. Only King Jesus, only his way, allows us to step into the fullness of what life is all about. Pilate hears all this. He's had a literal front row conversation, interrogation of Jesus. He's had what human beings throughout history, so many people would have loved to have had, the opportunity to sit down with Jesus and engage in conversation. He's heard all of this, and watch how he responds. After hearing all this about Jesus' kingdom, about this whole idea of truth, and he says these words, famous question. Jesus says, everyone on the side of truth listens to me, and Pilate says, what is truth? Retorted Pilate. And we're going to pause there. Just think about this for a moment. Everything he got to hear from Jesus, everything that could have been there, the ways, the conversation, what he does is what all of us at times would rather do, me included, okay? Please don't, is we would rather just not engage at times in what Jesus is saying. For some people, they go through their life, and this is, in so many ways, a symptom of, Pilate couldn't have sounded much more like he was from the year 2022 than by asking this question, what is truth? What is truth? It's just a way of going, you know what? Who can know? It's a way of just letting skepticism, I don't know, I'll just try and step back, knowing who could really know anyway. And it can be so easy to live in a world where that's the kind of way to keep Jesus at arm's length. Who could ever know anyway? Or it can be easy even in our own lives to have things that are going on, and we wonder, Jesus, are you calling me to realign with you? Are you calling me to align with your truth here? And yet, maybe sometimes if we're a little uncomfortable, we can kind of just push them away. Oh, what's true? I don't know. Who really knows? And maybe I'll just kind of keep going on my way. But Jesus is always invited. We cannot help it. We are always forced to make a decision. Who is Jesus? And is he my king? Pilate ends up Going back to the crowd, it says in second part of 38, he says, I find no basis for a charge against him, but it's your custom for me to release you, one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? He's still trying to almost antagonize him. They shout back, no, not him. Give us Barabbas. And so it goes on. Can I just encourage this one? You know what Pilate did is he just wants to go, I'm not making a decision. What do you guys want? I'm out on this. He's not me. This is not to do with me. What do you guys want? Can I encourage you this one thing? Let's just not be people who try to push that decision elsewhere. But if we want to find the life that is truly life, life in all its fullness, it's what Jesus said he wants for us. We find it when we acknowledge him as king. We find it when we acknowledge, actually, life is found in walking in your ways, Jesus. Life is found when we are on the side of truth, that we listen to Jesus. We hear his voice. And we don't just say, that's a nice idea. But the whole idea of listening, what Jesus is talking about, we obey those things. We walk in those things. And we become a part of his kingdom. We become a part of that place in this world. It's not like the kingdoms of this world, but it is the kingdom where in our lives, Jesus, we say, your will be done in my life as it is in heaven. And that's where we find the life that is truly life. Jesus, King Jesus. You know, wherever you are this morning up in Marwa, right here in Mullaloo, if you're at home, I want to invite you just to stand up. Just stand up where you are. And the way we're going to kind of bring this message to a close is I want to invite you to do exactly what we're talking about for this few weeks. I want to just create a few moments in your life and space to behold the man. When Pilate said those words, he thought he was almost just mocking. He thought he was almost just saying, look, Jesus is no threat anymore. You don't need to worry about him. Behold him. This is all he is. But those words have, throughout the centuries now, been God's invitation to people. Behold the man. Jesus invites each one of us to stop, to look, to consider, and to decide. Jesus, will you be my king? Jesus, will I walk in your ways? Jesus, would you speak into my life and help me to see where I'm pursuing other kingdoms? Jesus, would you speak into my life and help me to hear the truth so I could know the truth and it could set me free to live the life you created me for? So I want to invite you to do what will suit you for the next couple of moments. You can bow your head. You can close your eyes. You can hold out your hands. You can, whatever will help you to create a moment where you can just focus your attention on Jesus. And I want to encourage you maybe to just spend a few moments in prayer to him, giving thanks to him, finding a way to hold him almost in the eyes of your heart or mind and just behold him. Behold him as king. And whatever you believe about him, to declare, that's my decision. Jesus, I want you to be king. If you're someone who wants him to be the king in your life, to say, Lord, is there anywhere I need to hear your voice, hear your whisper, so that I can align myself with your truth? Give him thanks, give him praise, but take this next couple of minutes and just behold King Jesus. Jesus, in this moment, we thank you that you came to set us free. Lord, I want to pray for each one of us in this room, online, wherever we are. I want to pray that you would open the eyes of our heart just a little bit more to see you. I want to pray you'd open the ears of our heart just a little bit more to hear you. That God, we might hear your voice, we might know it, we might walk in your ways. Lord, I pray as your servants, you'd help us to know your will, to be those who live lives saying, not our will, but yours be done, Lord. I pray we would know you, see you, worship and honor you, King Jesus.